Hi, I'm Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of RegAlytics. Welcome to this week's regulatory roundup. I got a lot of great feedback last week about the children's tent, so I felt if you need to more spice up your regulatory news, I've included this and this. Either way, I love the comments, so keep them coming. This week, there were 972 alerts from 160 unique U.S. regulators. 349 had to do with coronavirus. The regulator of the week is the good old IRS. As of May 8th, the agency's website had been visited a record 1 billion times, up 141% compared to the same time last year. They also released state-by-state economic impact payment figures, so you can go and look up your state and see how many people they sent a check to and how much money it was worth. The topic of the week is privacy. Starting with the CDC's release of state resources for reopening, contact tracing has become the buzzword du jour. California launched California Connected, the state's comprehensive contact tracing program and public awareness campaign. As part of this program, public health workers from communities across the state will connect with individuals who test positive for COVID-19 and work with them and the people they've been in close contact with to ensure they have access to confidential testing, as well as medical care and other services to help prevent the spread of the virus. Maryland announced its statewide contact tracing operation will be fully operational next week, covering all 24 of the state's jurisdictions. To launch the operation, Maryland quintupled its disease investigation capacity and will have more than 1,400 investigators. New Mexico is trying to hire for 200 to 250 open contact tracing positions. The North Dakota governor issued an illuminating statement about privacy policy for its new Care19 contact tracing app. Care19 does not require or utilize names, addresses, emails, phone numbers, or other direct personal information, and data on places visited by the user is held securely using a randomly assigned anonymous 32-digit number. None of this data is being shared or sold for commercial purposes, and a part of the program includes functionality from the app Foursquare, but the agreement between the various parties involved doesn't allow Foursquare to collect any Care19 data or use it in any form beyond simply determining nearby businesses and returning that information. Rhode Island also issued a new app called Crush COVID RI. The Illinois Department of Employment Services announced a data breach in its pandemic unemployment assistance database. Apparently, there was a glitch where a single claimant was able to see the personal information of other claimants. The person reported the issue immediately, and it launched a huge investigation where the state hired Deloitte to figure out what happened. Anyway, based on the investigation, it's believed that the claimant unintentionally viewed the information of a handful of other claimants, and there's no indication that any personal information was or will be improperly used. But out of an abundance of caution, the department is going to notify 32,483 claimants whose information could have been possibly viewed to ensure full transparency. Also on privacy, the FTC said that new data shows active duty service members are 76% more likely than other adults to be the victims of identity theft. Also interesting is that 14% of active duty service members who reported identity theft said that it was a family member or someone that they know who misused their data, compared to just 7% of other adults. And reports are suggesting that this often happens when people have access to important documents or financial records that are left behind when they're on military assignment. And finally, because it's privacy related, the Rhode Island State Police Department redacted the names of all of the credibly accused individuals when they delivered on an open public records request. And the Attorney General of Rhode Island agreed it was appropriate to hide those names to protect the privacy of the individuals who all happen to be associated with the Roman Catholic Diocese of Providence. For those of you following LIBOR, the Department of Treasury is requesting comments on the possibility of issuing a floating rate note indexed to the Secured Overnight Financing Rate, or SOFR. Treasury has not made a decision whether to do it and wants to hear your comments in order to make that decision. You have until July 6th. For those of you following Cannabis, the governor of the Virgin Islands resubmitted an amended version of his proposed Virgin Islands Cannabis Use Act to the local legislature. For those of you following SROs, a few weeks ago, I pointed out that the FICC, with very little fanfare, asked for comments on including the LEI for any newly onboarded clients, and they passed off liability to their customers for misreporting an LEI. It was approved by the SEC with no comments from anyone. I always find it amazing how few comments there are on these regulations generally. So if you're watching this, start writing comments. FINRA dropped a big rule change that amended 15 rules at once to provide temporary relief from certain timing, method of service, and other procedural requirements during the period that FINRA's operations are being impacted by coronavirus. The FHFA revised regulatory capital requirements for Fannie and Freddie, which has been lauded as an important step towards bringing the conservatorships to an end of these government-sponsored entities. Our Fine Tracker picked up some interesting stuff this week. 33 states settled with Santander over violations of consumer protection laws by exposing subprime consumers to unnecessarily high levels of risk and knowingly placing these consumers into auto loans with a high probability of default. The settlement will provide $550 million in relief for consumers. In addition to a really big robocall-related bust last week, this week the FTC and the FCC sent joint letters to 4 voice-over internet protocol providers warning them that routing and transmitting illegal coronavirus-related scam robocalls is itself illegal and may lead to federal law enforcement against them. The Alabama Securities Commission issued 2 emergency cease and desist orders for 2 different Craigslist-related scams. The first scam approached investors across 49 states to invest their COVID-19 stimulus checks in a scheme. And the second one approached investors across at least 22 states, claiming that prospective clients could exploit the current coronavirus crisis for a weekly profit of $5,000 by trading penny stocks from the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry, whose stocks are experiencing significant price fluctuations due to the pandemic. The scammer claimed that he could consistently produce 400 to 1,000% investment returns, a claim which investment professionals know is blatantly absurd. In other federal news, we've talked before about the CRA, or the Community Reinvestment Act, that a few months ago was supposed to be overhauled. Interestingly, this week, the OCC announced new rules on the CRA, but the FDIC did not join in the final rule, and the proposed rule did not have the backing of the Federal Reserve. The U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs was incredibly disappointed, to say the least, saying that the leader of the OCC did this in a rush without considering thousands of thoughtful comments and was walking out the door anyway because he was going to be replaced. So we will see what the new OCC leader will do with this round of comments that come in. Speaking of comments, the OCC is asking for comments about mandatory contractual stay requirements for qualified financial contracts. So those of you managing QFC programs may want to take a look. Also, the SEC is asking for feedback on Rule 15C33. So those of you in margin and collateral, take a look at that. The FTC sent out 50 letters to scammers claiming COVID-related solutions. And I've decided that my new hero is SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce, who I'm hereby crowning as the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the SEC. Maybe it's because I've seen her speak in person, but she's always commenting on the most cutting edge of issues, from cryptocurrency to this week, ESG metrics. So for those of you in impact investing or the environmental social governance space, check out her comments. She is just so darn practical and says it how it is. In state news, budgets was on a lot of regulators' minds. New Jersey, Indiana, and Texas had announced budget cuts. New York has announced a special fund for minority and women-owned businesses that didn't manage to get federal funding. And interestingly, for the first time in 38 years, the Idaho state government will not borrow money in the bond market to meet anticipated cash flow requirements for its current fiscal year. But let's get on to the real news: alcohol. The governor of Texas is waiving late fees for Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission license and permit renewals, but way better is Pennsylvania's new drinks to go law. The governor there signed House Bill 327, allowing the temporary sale of cocktails to go from bars, restaurants, or hotels with a liquor license. And it took effect immediately. So happy drinking. That's it this week for RegAlytics US Alerts. Join us every Wednesday morning on LinkedIn, and for the longer version, see us on YouTube. And keep those comments coming because they keep me motivated during these crazy times.